First of all, it's about Fauci. It's a bit confusing. I mean, like what color tie do you have? What's the color of the carpet? He wouldn't even answer that. What is his focus?
Well, Fauci, let's think about it. First of all, he is the beneficiary of an auto pen pardon for what that's worth. You know, but if you you remove the question of his pardon aside, he supposedly has been pardoned, but isn't it interesting that he's still pleading the fifth? Ordinarily, if you've been pardoned, there's no reason to plead the fifth because you can't be prosecuted. Now, having said that, he's been pardoned for any federal crimes, but not for state crimes, which is probably why he's doing that. He pled the fifth on the color of his tie, the color of his handkerchief, this, that, and the other. But if it's about the science, why you got to plead the fifth? If you think about what Fauci and his cohorts have done, they have created mass mayhem and damage to Americans on two fronts. One is with the experimental jab. And you and I have talked about this. I've been involved in legal actions involving that jab and know it well, did not take it, preached against it like you have. But know that the death rate has spiked above every other vax combined over a 30-year period since the government started taking adverse reaction statistics on vaccines, number one. But number two, and people aren't really talking about this, but the regimen that was put in, I'm not talking about the jab, I'm talking about something else that may be just as dangerous. The regimen that was put in for COVID treatment in hospitals. So if you had to go to hospital for COVID, what they would do first, the first step in the regimen was to treat you with something called remdesivir, one, and then two, to put you on a ventilator. Let's look at remdesivir. Remdesivir, and this is outlined in Bobby Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci, which I recommend to everybody. I read that book during the end of COVID before Bobby Kennedy even ran for president as a Democrat. He did his country a service, and I listened to it on tape and then bought the book, and it's very thick, but it's cross-referenced. But Bobby Kennedy points out that in Africa, in the 5 to 6 years before COVID, they were using this remdesivir kind of as an experimental drug to treat AIDS and Ebola patients. It's supposed to be an antiviral thing. Well, the death rate from the remdesivir was so high at 60, that's 60%. They pulled it off the market in Africa. It's causing major organ failure, major kidney failure, lung failure. Well, after they pulled it off in Africa, they put it on the market in the United States, Donna. After they seen how deadly it was in Africa, and after the Africans pulled it off, they put it on the market. And they were paying hospitals to use it and paying hospitals to use these ventilators. And Fauci's role in all that is something that if I were his lawyer, I would never be his lawyer, but if I were, I'd say, look, dude, you better be careful. Because there's a lot here that still hasn't even come to the light of day. And I would imagine that's why you saw him, taking the fifth, every time he blinked his eye, and every question, even though this question seemed preposterous to take the fifth on some of his questions, he did anyway. So we'll see how it comes about.
Yeah. I have a question too about, because his nervousness, there were times that he was just rattling papers, just like this. But, so basically he's getting by with it, it looks like. But can something be done on a state level?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you better believe it. You better believe it. We've had Democrat attorney generals in North Carolina since 1898. But you had a right Republican attorney general, for example, in North Carolina. Some of these perpetrators of these deadly treatments can be called into question. He is not immune from state prosecution if you can prove that what he has done has harmed citizens of a certain state. You got to be able to prove it, but he certainly is not immune from state investigation, from state civil action, or from state prosecutions by any means. And we have, half the states have Republican attorneys general. The Democrat attorneys general are going to let him slide, but right there in South Carolina, I'd like to see Alan Wilson do something. We got a Democrat in North Carolina. I hope that's going to change in 2028. Democrat Attorney General Jeff Jackson here in North Carolina won't do a thing about Fauci or Roy Cooper or any of them, but they need to be held. Republican attorneys general in these states need to hold these COVID pushers, these COVID vax and experimental medicine type pushers like Fauci and Deborah Birx and the ones who were responsible for it locally here in North Carolina. You had Roy Cooper and Mandy Cohen. They need to have their feet held to the fire, and they need to account for the damage that they have thrust upon the people during this COVID scam, which is the most aggressive act of unconstitutional tyranny in this country since probably FDR threw Americans in prison during World War II simply because they're of Japanese ancestry.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama is already stating that once he gets into office as governor, if that happens, that he's really going to go for it. Well, Fauci's going to really have to pay for it. I hope he does. Well,
Coach Tuberville is on mark. You know, and we'll be stuck with a Republican AG in North Carolina here for another couple of years, but we'll be stuck with a Democrat AG, Jeff Jackson, for another couple of years. If we ever get a Republican in there, people have to answer for what they have done. These purveyors of these COVID vaccine scams and remdesivir scams and these scams where they're counting COVID deaths that really aren't COVID deaths in order to get money and scare people. They need to be held to account, and I'm hoping the day will come when they are held to account, every one of them.
Well, even now, people who took the jab, the ones that didn't have an issue really so bad when they first took the jab are having issues now. I mean, young people are dying of heart attacks.
Right. Well, Donna, Peter McCullough, one of the inventors of the mRNA technology, warned against it because he pointed out the mRNA technology attacks the immune system. So even if it had stopped COVID, and Biden and Fauci both said, take the jab, you won't get COVID. They lied there, you know what's all. Even if it stopped COVID, if it's breaking down the immune system, people are going to get sick. And we tried to warn, some of us tried to warn and got laughed at. But now, unfortunately, we're being proven right. And I don't take any relish in being proven right on this because there are friends and family members of mine that foolishly took that jab. But you know, who I really don't blame is the governmental pharmaceutical complex, Fauci, Biden, here in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, Mandy Cohen, and every power-hungry fool that put their own power and the desire to see how far they could push a tyrannical envelope above the good of the people. They all need to be held to account.